The thing that seems to separate Naruto from the rest of anime out there is the quality of its battles. Whether it's Naruto vs Sasuke, Kakashi vs Obito, Madara vs the Shinobi Alliance, or something else, everyone knows that the battles in Naruto are unquestionably top tier. And in a series with so many battles, we often get to see matchups that everyone wants to see, such as the fated battle between the Uchiha brothers. However, sometimes there are characters who we get to see fight early on in the series and would all love to see a rematch later, but don't. And that is the case for the characters that we're looking at today, in Sasuke and Gaara. I think we can all agree that seeing their battle in the final round of the Chunin exams for the first time was one of the best anime battle experiences ever. I mean, you get to see Sasuke's speed increase from copying Lee, Gaara's kunai catching sand clones, and even Sasuke using the Chidori for the first time. This epic battle was short-lived though, as the Hidden Sand and Orochimaru initiated their plan to take down Konoha right as things were really getting good. We then get to see them battle shortly after this in the forest outside of Konoha. Cursemark Hatred-amped Sasuke versus partially transformed Gaara was an intense battle of not only extremely powerful combatants, but also intensely burning wills. This fight also, though, came to an early end, with Naruto showing up to save the Uchiha Avenger right before Gaara was able to strike the finishing blow. So the question I'll be asking today is, how would these two scarred prodigies fare against each other throughout the entire series? In other words, today we'll be diving into and exploring the question of Sasuke versus Gaara. But before we begin exploring anything, if you'd like to see more in-depth Naruto discussions and battle breakdowns, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, make sure to hit that notification bell to be among the first to know when new content drops. But without any further ado, let's begin. I would like to preface this by saying that in order to make this video as interesting as possible, I'd like to incorporate some story elements into it. What I mean by that is I'd like to find specific points in the series where Sasuke and Gaara could or did have interactions and break down how the battle between these two would have went in those particular moments in time with the circumstances of the particular times I use as the stipulations for the battle. For example, when talking about the 5 Kage Summit, I'll have to change some of the story elements to make it a true 1v1, but I will otherwise be essentially using it as it was in the original story in terms of locations, motivations, etc. And that said, despite Sasuke being one of my favorite characters, I will be doing my best to keep bias out of it. Also, I won't be covering every section of the series, as there are some places where their power either doesn't change or at least not enough to make a significant difference. That said, the first matchup we have is when they first interacted with one another. I think this one is pretty self-explanatory. This version of Sasuke gets absolutely embarrassed by weighted Lee, so he's getting slammed by Gaara. If you want to argue that this Gaara is featless, go for it, but I think it's pretty obvious that Sasuke just isn't as strong as Gaara here. Since the prelims wouldn't be interesting as Sasuke can't use his chakra, obviously the next matchup between these two prodigies is in the final stage of the Chunin exams, which we already saw. Gaara should be able to beat Sasuke easily here. Now, if you want to say that he loses because he'd be disqualified, I mean, go for it. I think had the Konoha Crush plan not been set into motion, Gaara would have entered his partial transformation state, and then Leaf Jonin would have jumped in and put him down. However, Sasuke, in my opinion, would have still lost that fight, technically, as he would have needed outside help to put him down. But again, within the confines of the Chunin exam regulations, Sasuke would win, quote-unquote, so do with that what you want, but I'm going to mark this down as an L for Sasuke. Without those story elements and Jonin hopping him to help him, though, had Naruto not shown up and interrupted the battle between Sasuke and Gaara during the Konoha Crush arc, Sasuke would have died. Gaara was just manhandling Sasuke and pushing him to a near-death state via chakra exhaustion. Now, yes, Sasuke was able to wound Gaara with that Chidori, and it was pretty freaking cool, not gonna lie, but he was still pretty clearly inferior to the partially transformed version he was facing. So had he not killed Sasuke at that point, Gaara fully transforming into Shukaku would have easily, basically guaranteed a loss for Sasuke. So again, Gaara wins. This next matchup, though, is my favorite one from part 1. The scenario we have here is Gaara versus Sasuke right after Sasuke pops out of the coffin in his newly awakened level 2 curse mark. In order for that to happen, we'll play with the story a bit and assume that Kimimaro dies from his illness against Lee, with Gaara showing up right after that, and then Sasuke popping out of his coffin right after that. Lee and Naruto would be out of commission after fighting Kimimaro, leaving us with a 1v1 between these two monsters. With his newly newly acquired clear-headedness and ability to actually get some sleep, Gaara got way stronger in this short period of time. However, Sasuke's level 2 curse mark gives him an unquantifiable, substantial boost in power. Now, I know a lot of you are screaming at the top of your lungs, it's not unquantifiable, it's at least 10 times. Now, just hold on, pump the brakes. Jirobo states that his strength is boosted by at least 10 times. Yes. However, Kiba states that Sakon and Yukon's chakra was boosted by 10 times. Then, looking at the databook statements for their curse marks, we see that Kidomaru's boost seems to come in the form of unparalleled precision, and Tayuya seems to get a crazy amp to her genjutsu. So, based on the fact that they all get a different type of boost, could you actually definitively say that Sasuke gets a 10 times boost in strength, speed, AP, durability, etc.? Definitely not. It is stated that he is especially compatible with Jugo's curse mark, and his proficiency with the curse mark is directly compared to Kimimoro's. But in the description for the Heaven and Earth seals, which Sasuke and Kimimaro possess, it's stated that, quote, although their actual effect and potency are not directly evident, the truth of why they were carved into Kimimaro and Sasuke is to draw out their extra power, end quote. That leads me to believe that the amp they receive is probably not a 10 times boost in AP like Jirobo, but rather some sort of unquantifiable overall boost. Does that mean that he doesn't get an AP increase? Obviously not. He clearly does, since his Onyx Chidori was able to stalemate QB amp Naruto's Vermilion Rasengan. I'm just saying that his curse mark isn't amping his Chidori by 10 times or something crazy like that. That said, this battle would be fierce. I believe this version of Sasuke is probably a little stronger than sick Kimimaro, but to be honest, he's not surviving a sand burial. The only reason Kimimaro was able to is because of his strange physiology. I will say though, I think Gaara would be far more reluctant to use it against Sasuke right away like he did to Kimimaro, as he kind of sees himself in Sasuke. However, if Sasuke tries to blitz off bat, Gaara's sand should be enough to defend against Sasuke's attacks, assuming Sasuke doesn't go right to the Chidori, which at this point, I'm not sure if he could defend against. In character, I could definitely see Sasuke making some sort of taunting comment before attempting to blitz Gaara, which, again, if he's not using his Chidori off rip, Gaara should be able to counter it with his sand defense. I then see Sasuke getting his legs caught by Gaara's sand like Kimimaro did, only for Gaara to try and pull a Naruto to save him with a speech. This would not work though, and Sasuke would likely cut his way out of the sand with the Chidori. This would probably lead to Sasuke getting some space and maybe firing a few CM2 amped fireballs at Gaara, only for them to be swallowed up by a tsunami of sand. You see, while he was giving his speech, Gaara would have been preparing more sand underground this whole time like he did against Kimimaro. He'd then launch a giant sand tsunami into a giant sand burial, which is simply not something Sasuke can survive, even in CM2. Again, the only reason Kimimaro survived it is due to the layer of bone he created under his skin, with his bones being harder than steel, and Sasuke cannot do that. So, yet again, the Uchiha Avenger is unable to match the Demon of the Sand. With Gaara clearly dominating every step of the way in Part 1, we move on to Shippuden. These fights would be a lot closer, and I know a lot of Sasuke fans are probably in the comments already, and if you think Sasuke wins any of these previous battles, by all means, drop a comment and I will respond. However, I just don't think there's anything to suggest that he beats Gaara in any of the previous matchups. I mean, Gaara is kind of a hard counter for him aside from the Chidori. But that being said, the next fight we have is pre-extraction Gaara versus Deidara fights Sasuke. I did a poll on my channel a while ago over this, and I wasn't really surprised at how it turned out, but I promise you, this fight is way closer than this poll results would indicate. The way a lot of people look at this is by saying, well, Sasuke and Gaara both fought Deidara, and Sasuke won while Gaara lost. Therefore, Sasuke should beat Gaara. But what do we always say? Naruto isn't Dragon Ball. This isn't all about power levels or straight one-to-one scaling. In Naruto, styles make fights. So let's quickly examine how they did in their respective battles. Firstly, Deidara calls both of them fast, referencing Sasuke's physical speed and Gaara's sand speed multiple times. With their speed, both Gaara and Sasuke were able to tag Deidara. However, Gaara tagging Deidara actually led to his demise, since that's how Deidara was able to get past his defenses. Deidara smartly integrated some of Gaara's sand into his clay spiders to allow them to burrow into the floating spherical defense Gaara was hiding in. Deidara also had to distract Gaara by threatening to essentially nuke the sand village in order to distract him enough from the burrowing clay spiders to land a blow. A lot of people are quick to point out that Deidara was low on clay and Gaara had environmental advantage being in the desert and all, and both of those are true. However, Gaara was at a significant disadvantage having to protect the village. Also, Sasuke just so happened to be able to hard counter Deidara's bombs with lightning style, which is not an advantage he holds against Gaara's sand, as it's not actually earth release. That said, I think these advantages and disadvantages sort of even out, but what does that mean for our battle? Well, if we assume that they're fighting in a neutral playing field, Gaara can still take to the skies once he realizes that Sasuke has superior physical speed, much in the same way that Deidara did. Once he's in the air, he has a significant advantage. We also know that he can utilize the minerals in the soil below Sasuke to create more sand, allowing for him to attack from above and below simultaneously. So, although Sasuke can use the CM2 wings to fly, he'd be fighting an uphill battle at this point. We actually get to see Deidara effectively keep Sasuke grounded for a majority of their fight by dropping explosives as Sasuke attempted to fly up to him. Gaara could replicate this with the sand fairly easily, so Sasuke would have a really hard time getting up there and would probably have to use some trickery to get to Gaara in order to make a dent. Now, I could see Sasuke attempting to use Genjutsu to create an opening in Gaara's defenses, like how he did with Deidara, but this might not work. Gaara and Shukaku are on good terms at this point, with Shukaku even allowing Gaara to continue to use his sand control ability even after being extracted. Yes, this ability to control sand comes directly from Shukaku, so if Sasuke uses a Genjutsu on Gaara, there's a decent chance that Shukaku would just break him out of it. And if not, Gaara's sand defense is passive, so the sand protecting him would just continue protecting him even if he's under Genjutsu, and I think that should give him enough time to snap out of the Genjutsu himself. That said, if Sasuke does time it right, he could definitely get Gaara with a subtle Genjutsu to create an opening for the Chidori, blasting his way through the sand defense and taking Gaara down. But the problem is, he would have to cast the Genjutsu at the right time, get up into the air with him, and then hit him with the Chidori, and I'm just not convinced that that timing is going to work. So for this battle, there's no real overall advantage in terms of speed on either side, since Gaara's sand should be fast enough to counter Sasuke's physical speed, although Gaara having the aerial advantage would tip the scales in his favor in regards to movement. Both of our combatants have really good stamina and chakra reserves, but Gaara has a tailed beast inside of him, so I'd give the stamina edge to him. Gaara does have some impressive attack potency, but Sasuke's Chidori and its variants, as well as Kirin, give him a pretty hefty AP advantage. However, I'm not sure that Sasuke could even use Kirin here, since it takes a significant amount of prep time and relied heavily on Itachi's Amaterasu, as well as the altitude of the Uchiha hideout, in order to pull it off. And I know some people are going to say that he was going to use it against Naruto and Team 7 with clear skies, but that goes against everything that we know about the jutsu, so that's either a Kishimoto error, or maybe he could pull it off without thunderclouds. But again, it goes against the way the jutsu is described, so let's just say there's an off chance he could pull it off if he strategically shoots fireballs at Gaara to heat up the sky like what he did against Itachi. So there's an off chance, but not super likely. And as far as defense goes, Gaara has an obvious advantage, and intellect obviously goes to Sasuke. Not that Gaara's dumb, but Sasuke's incredibly smart. So, who wins? Well, I think it could go either way, and there's a solid argument to be made for both combatants, but I do think that Gaara's aerial advantage would give him the slightest of edges here. While Sasuke was able to trick Deidara with subtle Genjutsu and get up into the air with him during their fight, again, Gaara's passive defense and Genjutsu resistance should counter Sasuke's only real win condition, unless you consider Kirin a legitimate win condition, which I don't because of how much prep time it takes and how many other elements go into it. But Gaara can easily stay out of Sasuke's range, chasing him with sand from both above and below, closing in on him bit by bit. And I just don't see a way that Sasuke is able to really pull this off without giving him a significant amount of plot armor. And I know some people might bring up the summonings, but I don't think Manda is really doing anything against Gaara here. I think that Manda just can't reach him if he flies up high enough, and Gaara does have wide-scale enough attacks to be able to deal with him, potentially sealing him or even getting him in a giant sand tsunami into a giant sand burial and just crushing him. And that said, I think it's most likely that Gaara uses his stamina advantage paired with his ability to attack Sasuke from both the ground he's standing on and the air above him to tire Sasuke out, eventually finishing him off with a sand burial and taking the W with mid difficulty. Sasuke would definitely put up a good fight since he's one of the craftiest and most tactical characters in the series, but he simply wouldn't be able to overcome Gaara's sand closing in from all sides. The following one doesn't really take a ton of deliberation, as I think it's pretty clear who wins here. The versions we're talking about are post-extraction, pre-summit Gaara and Taka Sasuke. Since we won't be really using any feats from Gaara at the 5 Kage summit at this point, Sasuke should win this relatively easy. Amaterasu should give him the edge here in my opinion. While Gaara is really strong, and this may be a bit headcanon-y, Gaara should be a bit weaker without Shukaku at this point, as he'd be vulnerable to Sasuke's Genjutsu now. So while I don't think Genjutsu is an automatic win condition, we don't see speed feats from Gaara's sand at this point to counter Amaterasu's speed or Sasuke's movement speed. So if he's hit with a Genjutsu, he'd basically be done for. To be honest, I'm not really sure how we would find ourselves in a scenario where those two versions of the characters fight, because, you know, they don't really cross paths at that point in the story. But it was weird, or felt weird, to leave out Taka Sasuke, so I just wanted to go ahead and throw that in there. But next, we move ahead and we find ourselves in a battle between 5 Kage Summit Gaara and 5 Kage Summit Sasuke. Both of these characters have gotten much stronger since the time of our last matchup. Although Gaara has lost access to Shukaku, he still has access to the sand and all of its abilities. However, Sasuke is now a wielder of 2 fully mastered Mangekyo Sharingan. The way I see this fight is basically from the same sequence of events that we had in the series, but Gaara goes to face Sasuke alone, while the rest of the Kage stay behind and wait. I'm not sure why they would, but that's what we're doing for now. I'd also like to remove the other members of Taka from the equation and Gaara's aid, so let's just say they're out taking down weaker shinobi, or they're fighting each other somewhere away from the battlefield for whatever reason. This would give us a true 1v1. Now, I gotta be honest, this fight is probably the most controversial one here. And I hate to say this, but Gaara should win pretty easily. Now, before you have an aneurysm, allow me to explain. The reason Gaara wins this is because the speed of his sand is so fast now that Sasuke will have trouble reacting to it effectively. You see, during the Sasuke fight with the Raikage, Sasuke ends up on his back, about to get curb stomped by A. As A's foot is about to slam down on him, Sasuke uses his Kagetsuchi to defend himself against the attack. Then something insane happens. Gaara's sand outspeeds both of them, intercepting the kick and saving A's leg as well as Sasuke's life. Now, not only is this a speed feat, this is also a defense feat. He was able to block a full version 2 Raikage A's kick, which his kicks and punches were smashing through the Susanoo ribcage. That's insane. And this speed feat is not insignificant. Gaara's sand outspeeding V2A is absurd, as Sasuke, with his MS active, was having a difficult time perceiving A's movement speed and could really do nothing but defend with his Amaterasu cloak Susanoo. So basically, Gaara's sand is faster than V2A's combat speed. That is actually somewhat corroborated by some of the feats later on in the war arc, but we'll get to that later. Essentially what I'm getting at here is that Gaara's sand being able to move that fast gives him an automatic win condition. Since we know that Gaara can bring his sand up underneath the Susanoo and grab the Susanoo user, as we see him do against Madara later on, there's no reason why he wouldn't be able to just grab Sasuke, pull him underground, and kill him via sand burial. Sasuke does have the win condition of Genjutsu, but it seems he has to get pretty close to activate it, as he only does that when he's up close to people. But that's not going to happen here, considering the way that Gaara fights. He'll stay back, blocking some Amaterasu shots like he did in the manga, while he monologues to Sasuke about why it's not too late for him, and eventually, he'll see that he's unable to save Sasuke from himself. Once the fight reaches that point, it's basically over. Now, you may be able to argue that Sasuke's Susanoo arrow would blast through Gaara's defenses, but I personally am not sold on it either way. It doesn't have any anti-feats, but its best feat through the 5 Kage Summit arc is piercing through some wood style, and Sasuke's Susanoo arrow doesn't have a ton of AP feats at this point, so I'm not sure I can say confidently that it would be able to make it through the sand. Plus, again, Gaara can just yank Sasuke out of the Susanoo or straight down into the ground if he really needs to. So the way I see this going is Sasuke shows up, Gaara intercepts him, Sasuke and Gaara begin having a short chat about revenge or something, and Sasuke launches his first attack. I imagine it would probably be an Amaterasu, because that's basically what he did when he first sees him in the manga, which would be countered by the sand. You could say that maybe Sasuke goes for a Chidori, but I would see Gaara either opening up a hole in the ceiling to fly up and get the aerial advantage, or simply using his sand to stall Sasuke's movement. Again, he can create sand using the minerals and the soil around them, so I don't see a reason he couldn't do that with the soil under the building they're in, or even with the materials that the building is made from themselves. This would allow for him to create a giant sand tsunami, giving him a pretty solid defense against the Chidori. That said, eventually Gaara is either getting Sasuke outside of his Susanoo and crushing him, or taking to the skies and then eventually crushing him. Based on how these characters fight, I don't really see a feasible win condition for Sasuke outside of maybe the Susanoo arrow. That said, the speed of Gaara's sand, his ability to keep Sasuke at a distance, his hard counters for Amaterasu and Chidori, and ability to get Sasuke despite his Susanoo, I give the edge here to Gaara. I know this one is controversial, so if I'm missing something, by all means, let me know. Now, from here on out, for the rest of these matchups, we're just going to be assuming for the story purposes that Sasuke basically always stays a bad guy, and he never goes and helps out the Alliance. Maybe he helps fight on the side of Madara and Obito, and then, later on, as an adult, as we cover those, he's a bad guy. So, next up, we have Early War Arc Gaara versus EMS Sasuke. Now, I'll be considering Early War Arc to be pre-Jubidara. This fight is much closer than the previous, since Sasuke at this point possesses a much more powerful Susanoo, can't be pulled out of his full-body Susanoo from below, and doesn't experience the same level of fatigue from his Mangekyo techniques or the loss of sight. His speed also dramatically increases, scaling up around KCM2 Naruto's level, so Gaara's sand is no longer blitzing him. The reason this remains close, though, is simply due to Gaara's feats against Madara. Gaara uses his sand to tank multiple blows from Madara's Susanoo, essentially no-selling all of his attacks, aside from the one that took the tops off of numerous mountains. He also played a big part in stopping Madara's meteor, and even used these sand hand construct things to halt the progress of the Geto Mazo pulling Shikaku, despite it being able to pull all of the tailed beasts with relative ease. So basically, Gaara's sand is extremely tough and extremely strong. Gaara even uses his sand to overpower Rasa's, despite gold being heavier than sand, which is supposed to make it an excellent counter for Gaara's abilities. In that same battle, Rasa even compares Gaara's sand control to Shukaku's, implying that Gaara still has Bijou levels of power even after getting Shukaku extracted, which actually makes sense whenever you consider all the other things he does in the war, like stopping a meteor, albeit with Oniki's help. Despite all of that, though, Sasuke should be able to take this W. Despite the fact that he'll have a tough time getting through Gaara's defenses, Sasuke should have the AP and stamina now to break through Gaara's sand and land a fatal blow. I do see a potential win condition for Gaara in the Grand Mausoleum Seal. It was capable of temporarily holding Madara's Susanoo, leading me to believe that it might be able to hold and seal Sasuke's substantially weaker Susanoo. That, however, is a bit of headcanon, so I think the more solid win condition of Sasuke using his overwhelming AP and speed to break through Gaara's defenses and land a killing blow is where I realistically need to lean. So, in a relatively tough battle, Sasuke wins this matchup. The next round is really obvious, so I'll make it quick. We have Rinnegan Sasuke versus End of War Gaara. Now, while Gaara does have some even more impressive speed feats than before, Sasuke simply clears him by multiple tiers of power. He's faster, has arguably more chakra, can teleport, and is able to access a perfect Susanoo that Gaara has no answer for. So now we're jumping ahead to Boruto, and this is going to be fun. That said, the next matchup we have more of the same. Rinnegan adult Sasuke versus Boruto era Gaara is pretty similar to the previous matchup. Sasuke is just too fast and too powerful for Gaara to have any hope of stopping him. I mean, Sasuke can teleport, he can use the Rinnegan abilities, his Chidori is absolutely busted, so love Gaara, he's incredibly strong in the Boruto era, but he's not stacking up against Rinnegan adult Sasuke. This final round, though, is super interesting. For our last matchup, we have One-Eye adult Sasuke versus Boruto era Gaara. I'll preface this by stating the obvious. The winner here is pretty unclear, since we really don't know what this version of Sasuke can do. So I'll give both the most and least generous takes for Sasuke and see how it pans out in both scenarios. The most generous interpretation for Sasuke is that he lost a bit of chakra. We know that Rinnegan amps your chakra, so losing it would lower his, and the Rinnegan abilities, including his Amino Teijikara teleportation. But since we see him use the Amaterasu in the eye that should possess Kagetsuchi, we'll assume that Sasuke has both his Amaterasu and Kagetsuchi abilities. Also, since Madara was able to use his Susanoo with no eyes, we'll assume that Sasuke can still use his Susanoo with one eye. To put a cherry on top, every physical stat for Sasuke stays the same, aside from his chakra levels. With this interpretation, Sasuke should win fairly easily. Boruto era Gaara is crazy strong, being able to react to and temporarily hold even the likes of fused Momoshiki. However, Sasuke straight up blitzes Momoshiki, so he should have a sizable speed advantage. Sasuke still having access to both EMS abilities also grants him the option of spamming Amaterasu and Kagetsuchi in order to lay lethal traps for Gaara while he attacks from the skies with his perfect Susanoo. Gaara does have the win condition of sealing Sasuke, since he was able to hold Urashiki for a long time with his sealing, but Sasuke might be able to break out of it with the Susanoo. So with this interpretation, Sasuke's versatility, speed, and overwhelming power should secure him the W. But the not-so-generous interpretation flips the script entirely. If we assume the worst for Sasuke, he would almost definitely lose here. Sasuke in this matchup would not only lose the Rinnegan and all of its abilities along with the Chakra Amp, he'd also lose Kagetsuchi, since we've only seen him use Amaterasu post-eye poke. He's also losing the Susanoo, since we don't know if he can still use it. This Sasuke almost certainly gets caught by Gaara's sand and sealed. I don't think he has an answer for Gaara's sand defense, since we've seen Gaara counter the Amaterasu already, and I mean, his Chidori is really powerful, but unless he's able to get up into the air with him, which he can't without his teleportation or his Susanoo, he'd have a really hard time landing it. He'd also have basically zero chance of escaping Gaara's seal, so that's GG. So let's review. In part 1, Gaara wins the first time they meet in the Forest of Death, in the final stage of the Chunin exams, during the Konoha Crush arc, and the Sasuke retrieval arc. This makes Gaara 6-0 in part 1. In Shippuden, pre-extraction Gaara beats Deidara fights Sasuke, Taka Sasuke beats post-extraction Gaara, Gaara beats Sasuke during the 5 Kage Summit, EMS Sasuke is beating early war arc Gaara, Rinnegan Sasuke gets an easy dub over late war Gaara, adult Rinnegan Sasuke beats adult Gaara, and One-Eye Sasuke versus adult Gaara goes either way depending on your interpretation. This gives us a 4-2-1 record for their Shippuden matchups. That brings our total for the series to 8-4-1 in favor of Gaara, with 6 of his wins coming in a dominant 6-0 Part 1 performance. If you'd like to give Sasuke the win during the Chunin exams final round because of disqualification, feel free to, but that still brings it to 7-5-1. But what did you guys think? Did I miss anything? Was I 100% correct? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you liked the video, make sure to like the video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Have an awesome day.